Recently, Danny Haiphong interviewed Zhang Weiwei, and two terms which were mentioned during the course of the interview were ВЗАИМНОЕ ГАРАНТИРОВАННОЕ УНИЧТОЖЕНИЕ, which means mutual assured destruction, or MAD for short in English, and ВЗАИМНОЕ ГАРАНТИРОВАННОЕ процветание, which means mutual assured prosperity, or MAP for short in English. The interview focused on China, and while some revere Chinese culture, others are suspicious of the intentions of the Chinese government. The same can be said about Russia. У вас есть подозрения, which means do you have any suspicions? Вы им доверяете, which means do you trust them? Professor Weiwei also spoke of a win-win attitude, which he said is held by China, versus a win-lose attitude, which he said is held by the USA. He seemed to think that a win-lose attitude ultimately leads to a lose-lose situation, such as mutual annihilation. Верны ли его утверждения, which means are his claims accurate? Some relevant phrases to consider include ядерный Armageddon, which means nuclear Armageddon, глобальная катастрофа, which means global catastrophe, полное уничтожение, which means total annihilation, ударные осадки, which means nuclear fallout, грибовидное облако, which means mushroom cloud, and ядерный Holocaust, which means nuclear holocaust. By the way, it is a bit ironic that when asking the USA for more weapons, Zelensky says, die, 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 which means give, give, give in Russian. However, it sounds like die, die, die in English. And while the topic of this lesson is deadly serious, we cannot end this lesson without a few jokes. Знаете, почему нельзя доверять атому? Means, do you know why you can't trust an atom? Потому что они везде выдумывают. Which means because they make everything up, as in to fabricate. Also, потому что они составляют все means because they make up everything, as in to compose or to constitute. Что сказала лазерное оружие атомной бомбе? Means, what did the laser weapon say to the atomic bomb? Хорошо, boomer, which means, okay, boomer. Of course, the pun doesn't work in Russian, but you get the general idea. Что случилось, когда Наполеона убили бомбой? Means, what happened when Napoleon got killed with a bomb? Napoleon разорвало на части, which means Napoleon was blown apart. Of course, blown apart sounds like Bonaparte in English, but nothing like this happens in Russian. It should also be mentioned that разорвать usually means to tear, but it can also mean to explode. And finally, the Spy vs. Spy comic strip published by Mad Magazine should be mentioned. Not only is it an amazing coincidence that this comic strip appeared in a magazine called Mad, which, as you will recall, stands for Mutually Assured Destruction, but the comic strip is the perfect representation of two superpowers intent on developing increasingly deadly ways of destroying each other. They have so much in common, and yet they are always at war with one another. The absurdity of the situation has endless comedic potential, and yet is incredibly tragic. Грустно, но это правда, which means sad but true.
Ruski and your humble instructor, your trusty guide, an ignorance buster. This lesson is done, but you're not through yet. Go do the drill so you won't forget. 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 До свидания.